Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As some of you may already know, I also host the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and recently I interviewed guests Tamara Veitch and Rene DeFazio about their sci-fi fantasy series, The One Great Year. The first two books of that are out. They are called The Emissary and The Emerald Tablet. In the interview, we mostly talk about The Emissary, but we do touch on The Emerald Tablet. And there is a third coming out in sometime next year in 2020. So, seeing as how this is a sci-fi fantasy kind of book, I thought it would be fun to also feature that interview here on the Sci-Fi Podcast. We are talking, as I said, about The Emissary, and the description of that book is as follows. When the world collapses from a golden age into one of chaos and strife, mankind's salvation lies in the hands of eternal emissaries, guardians chosen to protect the secrets of a sacred ancient civilization and to guide humanity back to enlightenment even as its darkest hour approaches. Marcus and Theron are two lovers bound by an eternal and unshakable bond. As a series of catastrophic events nearly destroys their world, the two, along with the chosen few, become emissaries, destined over the course of 13,000 years and through many reincarnations to lead humanity into an era of peace and prosperity as foretold by the elders of their race. But the forces of evil have taken possession of one man, Helgul, who relentlessly pursues Marcus and Theron through time, determined to destroy them and ruin all hope for salvation. One Great Year, The Emissary, tracks Marcus's epic adventure across centuries of human civilization to present day, where envoys of darkness gather, threatening to bury the life-giving secrets of Atatala forever. Good and evil come to blows, and the future of mankind hangs in the balance. That, as I said, is the description of The Emissary. It is book one in the One Great Year series. And this book is, it's part historical fiction, it's part fantasy, part sci-fi, part young adult. It's a series of flashbacks. There's present-day Marcus in Seattle, but then he is flashing back to some of the lives that he has lived over 13,000 years. One thing about Marcus and Helgul is that they can remember their past lives. The majority of emissaries cannot, and there is a reason behind that, but Marcus and Helgul can remember it. So Marcus has 13,000 years of memories. That's sometimes I think my brain is full. That is a really full brain. He can remember those, and he is constantly trying to find Theron, who is his soulmate. She does not have her past memories, but he does. He is constantly on the lookout for Helgul, who is working at odds with the emissaries. He is one of the adversaries. And so they're working to... The emissaries are working to bring civilization back into a golden age. It has gone through a cycle. It is from golden to silver to bronze to iron to the dark age and then back up. And it culminates in the One Great Year, hence the title of the trilogy. So Marcus and Theron are emissaries. Helgul is an adversary. Marcus and Helgul can remember their past lives. Again, you get the present-day Marcus, who is in Seattle, and then past lives. In The Emissary, you get the flashback to when Marcus is young, is a teenager, and first becomes an emissary, and so you learn how that process happens and how they know it is time to choose the emissaries, etc. And then there is another past life that is described in this book. Then the second book has more of the story of trying to guide civilization, guide humanity into that one great year, as well as past lives of Marcus, Helgul, and Theron. So I am excited to find out where this series goes, to read the second one, and then when the third one comes out, to read that as well. Let's go ahead and turn now to that interview with Tamara and Rene and find out more about their experience with writing The Emissary and the One Great Year series. And as usual, I forgot to tell you that I have copies to give away. So if you are interested in reading The Emissary, again, book 1 of the One Great Year series, stay tuned to the end of the podcast and I'll give you details on how you can enter to win a copy of The Emissary. Now, let's go ahead and turn to the interview with Tamara and Rene.
Hi, Tamara and Rene. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. We are happy to be here.
Thanks for having us, Sarah.
It is wonderful to have you, and we are going to talk about your book, The Emissary. It's book 1 of the One Great Year series. Before we get to the book, though, I would love to just get to know the two of you a little bit.
So if you could share a little something about yourselves.
Sure. Do you want to start, Rene, or do you want me to?
You first, my dear.
Okay. Well, my name is Tamara, and I'm a mom of 3, which keeps me absolutely busy in our community and doing all that kind of stuff. I've been a writer and an absolute reader who loves all kinds of books my whole life. And it wasn't until I met Rene that I actually published anything. So it was our work together that resulted in me actually living out my dreams of becoming an author. And we just, once we met, we had a lot in common, and we went from there.
Yeah, we were both basically world travelers, spent a lot of our life traveling. And, when I'm not writing, basically, because that's all we've been doing for 5 years now. And, we're taking the kids to baseball and to hockey and doing all the dad things.
And traveling a lot.
And traveling a lot.
We budget a lot of things out, like meals out and all that kind of stuff, so that we can make some big trips. It's pretty fun.
Oh, nice.
And we still search there with it.
What's your favorite place that you've traveled to, if you can name one?
We would definitely have to say Peru and Bolivia. We started there at one of the lifetimes in The Emissary takes place in an ancient civilization called Tiahuanacu in ancient Bolivia. And so we went there on a research trip, and it absolutely inspired us.
Yeah, it blew our mind. The ruins that are there are quite mysterious and unexplainable. They're well beyond anything that should have been able to be constructed. The thousands of years ago that they were. So there's a lot of questions around it, which for fiction authors really gets you going and your imagination going and the storylines pumping.
Yeah, there's a pyramid structure there currently, and they've discovered another pyramid underneath the one that's currently there that's thousands of years old. So
I heard of that.
Yeah, it was a new discovery, and they started excavating when we were there. So we were, it was kind of unknown information at that time.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. Beautiful. And Puma Punka is right beside it. And it is an anomaly on itself. It has, 60-ton, perfectly flat slabs that have 1 millimeter variance from one side to the other. And apparently this was all created with copper wire and stone tools.
Wow. So that kind of brings us to The Emissary, because, it's not the best segue, but it does play a part. So let's talk a little bit about The Emissary. Can you talk about your inspiration for the story?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, Rene should talk about that, because it was his inspiration that began this whole journey for us. So.
When I was younger, I bought one of those round the world tickets, and I was backpacking around the world to all these monolithic sites and absolutely inspired by them. And I was reading a book by Graham Hancock called Fingerprints of the Gods. And in that book, he outlines this alternative history that there was a much older civilization than we are currently taught in schools, but it was completely wiped off the face of the earth by some major catastrophe. And I thought, why isn't everybody in the world talking about this? And so we thought, why don't we put our characters into that world?
Right. Because Graham's book is a nonfiction book, and Rene saw the opportunity to get the idea of these world histories and these lost civilizations out there in a fiction form where people could become informed, but also be entertained along the way. So it was, he did a 15-page treatment screenplay. And when we met, we decided to try and write together and create this new adventure. And he pitched me the 15-page screenplay, and I was blown away. So the next day, I started writing, and we started writing together, and it's been 10 years since that day.
Wow. So so you mentioned that his book, Graham's book, was nonfiction, and you decided this would be a good opportunity for fiction. This book, it has elements of historical fiction, young adult, spirituality, science fiction, fantasy. I mean, it's really hard to classify it under just one genre. Did you start writing with the intent of having it be multi-genre, or did it just come out of the subject matter?
You know what? We wanted to create a project that we both were excited by. We wanted to put all the elements into it that we were excited as readers to experience. And we wanted people to walk away thinking about the work.
Well, and as far as genres, it's as authors, I don't know. And whenever we talk to any other authors, and we're on Twitter on the writing community and connecting, trying to pinpoint your book into genres is one of the most difficult things that a writer can have to do after the fact, especially when we're doing research and new information is coming through and we're bringing that in. It's like doing your synopsis when you take a 200-page or a 500-page novel and you have to break it down into where does it exactly fit. It is so difficult, and it's almost easier to hand it to the publisher and say, help, you figure out what genre this is, because for us, it's everything.
I'm going to jump in here so we can take our first break of the podcast. But see, it's a multi-genre book. If you are interested in almost whatever kind of book genre you're interested in, there's probably something for you in this series, just because of the nature of the flashbacks and everything that happens. So we are going to take that first break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the Emissary, more about writing, more about the series in general. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, and I will be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast, dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast. For the break, we were speaking about the multi-genre nature of the Emissary and of the One Great Year series. And now we are going to continue talking about that series. So let's go ahead and get back to that interview.
And it's interesting to me because the book is just under 200 pages, and it's almost like a couple of novellas in that book, because you do have the multiple lives, and so as you're telling the lives in the first part of the book, you get Marcus and Theron. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Theron, yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of, to me, that part felt like the young adult kind of book, but then they move into a different flashback to a different life in the latter half of the book. So it really did feel like novellas. Will the rest of the series kind of follow that same pattern?
It actually does, because there are different lifetimes and there's different points in history. Like from our real world history, we pull real characters in real times out through that. I don't want to compare us to J.K. Rowling because she's one of my heroes. I absolutely love the Harry Potter series. But as much as her books begin kind of with the kids and with the younger group, and they develop and they grow and they evolve, and the story gets more complicated and more in depth, that it's really the same sort of design.
Mm-hmm. And it's also interesting because your protagonist is someone who has multiple lives. So it's the same protagonist, Marcus, but he is not Marcus. he's Marcus and not Marcus. So can you talk a little bit about Marcus as the protagonist? What do you think will resonate with readers about him?
I think because he's such an identifiable type of person, he starts off, he's a reluctant hero, and he's pulled into this world that's far bigger than he's capable of coping with.
Right. He's very humble, and he doubts himself all along the way. And I think most of us, it doesn't matter how much training you get or how much feedback you get, we tend, in the big moments of life, we rise up, we deal with it, and then we say, we doubt ourselves along the way. Wow, how could I ever do that? How could I do it again? Should I really be taking all this on? And Marcus takes it on because he is an emissary. He has chosen to try to maintain a light balance and hope and the secrets of the ancients, which we kind of don't want to do a spoiler there. So you have to you'll have to read the series to find out the secrets of the ancients.
It's kind of like never underestimate the diligence of the human spirit.
But I think people will identify with Marcus just because he's not perfect. He has doubts. And even though he has past life memory and he has a lot more information about what's going on, what happens during, before life and after death, and he has all that information, but he's still a tortured soul because he has feelings and he's in the human journey along with us.
And he's cursed by his own memory of all the loss that he's had over 13,000 years. That's what's really fun about the Emissaries, because it actually takes place over 13,000 years, in under 200 pages. Right. So that's it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah. And Marcus is a little different from the other emissaries because he does have that past life memory. You're not supposed to be able to remember your past lives, but he does, as does Helgul. And Marcus and Helgul are juxtaposed throughout the story. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, they represent, Helgul and Marcus represent the balance kind of the universe, the micro and the macro. That there's this element of balance in the world between good and evil. There's not good or evil. We're all a combination of both. And it's our choices that we make that creates our evolving consciousness.
Right. And just to clarify a little what Rene's saying there is that the whole relationship between Helgul and Marcus shows the importance of how what choice you make in every moment dictates where your life goes and who you become. And you can always change that. And Marcus and Helgul are on that journey together of making choices, and you see how totally different their lives are, even though their beginnings were the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm sure that you have done a ton of research for the book. Can you talk a little bit about that research?
When we first started writing, we probably read about 100 nonfiction books about alternative world history, theorists, science, geology, quantum physics, all of it that points to all these different theories about our world history. And then we started traveling, and Rene had already done a ton of traveling.
Yeah, we were trying to answer that question. What would a 13,000-year-old man know that the rest of us do not?
Right.
And that took us to a rabbit hole of information and knowledge. And when we got into that world, we we were enjoying it so much, and we're so excited by it. And we got to weave all of those stories through our story.
So the interesting part is that Rene had already traveled to Egypt and Angkor Wat and Stonehenge and Easter Island, and he traveled all these exotic places, and we continued to travel together. But when you're there, when you're boots on the ground, when you're actually seeing and feeling these places for yourself, it makes a big difference. And you see the anomalies, and they don't make sense, and you see why these alternative theories have grown, and the evidence for them is outstanding. So just doing all that research has really changed. It's kind of frustrating when you're talking to your kids in school and they're saying, oh, 6,000 years ago society started in Mesopotamia and civilization began, and we're like, well, there's a ton of evidence that it actually started a long time before that.
Yeah, we have quite extensive bibliography in the back of the Emissary of all of the work from these people, from Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch and Christopher Dunn and Walter Cruttenden. And then we even did sacred geometry stuff. We even tried to weave that through from Randall Carlson and Drew Melchizedek and the consciousness stuff from Thomas Campbell. So
our goal was to keep it simple, make it totally accessible. But you can speak more to that than us because you're a reader and we're the writers.
So hopefully we accomplish that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what you can fit into the. I've only read the first book. I know the second one's out. How did you figure out how to take 13,000 years and fit it into a trilogy?
Wow. Okay, so what we did is we edited for many, many years. So we ended up with, first we ended up with one book and a coming sequel. Then we realized that as that book evolved, as that one story grew and grew and grew, because as you're mentioning 13,000 years, we didn't want a 1,000-page novel. So we split it into 2 books, and that's, I think, what is that, 8 lifetimes? Mm-hmm. And the third book will be coming at the end of in October 2020. And as you mentioned, the other 2 are out right now. So it's been just editing, and any writer needs to absolutely.
Yeah, you know what? It's definitely a process, Sarah. And from where we started off to where we end, we still don't even know how we got here.
That's true. We definitely would not want to be starting again, looking at it going, let's try to redo that. No, that would be.
Well, yeah, now you have hindsight, so you know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
Exactly. Out of all of this experience and research and travel and editing, are there any autobiographical elements in the book?
Definitely, because when we first met, Tam and I, we were falling in love, and all of those experiences of finding your soulmate, we were experiencing in real life. So of course, all of those feelings and experiences are woven throughout the story.
I'm all mushy right now. That's a very nice answer, my dear. It's true. We started writing because we wanted to create a life together, and our life together didn't make much sense. Rene was, a single, traveling, writing backpacker, and I was a mom with 3 little kids. So we had to create something that worked together, and that desire and the love we felt for each other, and this idea of soulmates and people having a purpose together really resonated with us, that is the piece of us that's thrown in through the story.
It is time to take our second break of the podcast, but when we come back, we'll be talking about Book 2 of the One Great Year series. That book is The Emerald Tablet. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with Tamara Veitch and Rene DeFazio.
So the Emissary is book 1. Book 2, the Emerald Tablet, is out. Can you talk a little bit about book 2 without, giving too much away from book 1? I mean, we don't want spoilers.
Sure. Basically, book 2 takes place the second book 1 ends. So it's a continuation of the storyline, and then book 3 basically starts off the second book 2 ends.
Right. But book 2 has lifetimes from ancient Mongolia. It has lifetimes from ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle. It has a World War II lifetime. And that World War II lifetime was actually part of the original first story. We put it aside for a little while, and then it came back, and it's now at my absolute heart. That one's my favorite. That one really speaks to me, and I don't know if it's because it's our recent world history that we all learned about, that it's and people really identify with it and can feel what a powerful time in our world that was.
Yeah, book 2 is a lot of fun because it brings to life Plato and Socrates and Genghis Khan and all of these exciting characters in our history, and we bring them back to life, which was absolutely rewarding writing.
Mm-hmm. And what about the third book? When will it be released?
October next year.
2020.
Yeah, it's called The Ancient Book of Changes.
Okay. And are you working on that book right now, or are you working on another book, or are you taking a break? What are you doing right now in terms of writing?
We're writing book 3 right now.
Yeah, we're writing book 3 right now. And actually we've done something else that's really fun. On our website, we have a quiz called the Soul Purpose Quiz. And it's something that we did in an aside. It's a bit more fun. It's nonfiction. And it gives people a chance to go in and find out, what are you? What is your soul purpose? What's going to really fill you up in the world today? Like what should you be doing for work? And it groups people into warriors, elders, producers, and guardians. And everybody's a little bit of each of those categories, but it describes the category and it
and hopefully helps people find their purpose. I mean, that was the goal of it, in a fun and entertaining way.
Yeah, so we've been working on that a bit right now.
Fun. What if I take the quiz and it tells me that I'm an adversary? Should I be worried?
You know what the cool part is that we're all adversaries, but we're all emissaries. We're all emissaries. So the actual 4 categories aren't adversary, emissary, but within each of those categories, you can be an adversary or an emissary. Emissaries just try to do no harm. Adversaries just try to do what's good for the adversary.
Right.
The choice is yours.
Yeah, it's about Marcus and Helgul and choice again. It really is that dichotomy, that juxtaposition in the world that we're constantly dealing with.
Absolutely. You write as a couple. I'm always fascinated by co-author relationships. How, for you, the two of you, does that relationship work?
Well, there's a lot of wine, a lot of whining. You know what? It absolutely runs the gamut of emotions.
Yes.
And has evolved over the 10 years considerably.
Right. When we started writing, we didn't even live together, not for 4 years of it. So it was very much bringing work to each other, transferring. We used to sit side by side and try and plot out storylines. But the storylines are so set now and different things happen. So we find what we do now is we work separately. We discuss where we're going, what the plan is, and each of us goes and does our section, and then we trade. And Rene is all about the research, all about the imagination and the creativity of what if we did this? And he thinks of things that blow my mind, and I just don't have that brain.
Mm-hmm. And Tam is definitely the writer. She understands the melody of words. And absolutely can weave a beautiful rhythmic sentence that just makes it reading enjoyable.
Oh, thanks, honey.
You two are very sweet. I like talking to you. Before you started writing together, did you write solo?
We've both been writers our whole lives, but nothing like, we didn't really write novels. I wrote screenplays, and we wrote stories in our journals, and because we traveled, so you wrote journals the whole time. And I wrote music and poems, started there, and just kind of evolved into where we are now.
Yeah, and I have computer chips and a stack of. I have a novel that will never see the light of day that I was working on. And when I met Rene, I was working on a new novel because I knew at that point I was turning 40. I was a single mom. I was going through a divorce, and I said, who am I? I had to really figure out, who am I going to be, and who have I always been, and what do I want out of life? And I started writing, and then Rene and I started dating, and he turned to me one day and said, we're supposed to write a book together. And I went, oh my God, of course we are. And he gave me that treatment, and there we went. We kind of just knew after that.
Mm-hmm. And then, out of your journey as writers, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Read. Absolutely read. Read the classics. Read the best books that you can find. Stephen King's book on writing is excellent advice. What about you, Red?
You know what I find? I find that publishers right now, they want to cut back on their workload. So they're trying to find writers that are doing the work for them and out there pushing their work. And then when you get to a certain level, then that's the people that they're starting to pick and representing.
So just be motivated as a writer. Keep writing. I think most writers have to write. So don't give up, even if you're writing just for yourself. Journal and poetry and songs. Do whatever you need to do to keep yourself feeling whole.
Yeah, when our first book we independently released, and within 500 books of that book selling, we were optioned. And that, those people found us and then have helped us along the rest of the journey. So it's interesting that people do seek you out, once you've started to work your material out there and help them find you.
And just don't lose heart. Connect with other writers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a long road, regardless, any route you take.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you have a website, so can you tell us the address of the website and where people can find you on social media?
Sure. The website is onegreatyear.com. Our social media is all at One Great Year because the name of the series is the One Great Year series. So we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we are on Facebook. We're super interactive. We do all of our own social media. We don't have a big team running it for us. So if people want to talk to us and they want to connect and they have questions, we're really happy to interact with readers and other writers. And
we're trying to always put up, entertaining stuff and
positive
and
energy,
and knowledgeable, and get people talking.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've covered a variety of topics today, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like for people to know about the Emissary or the series or writing in general?
I think one thing that we always want to get across is one of the basic themes of our series and of our writing, and that's the idea that we're all connected and that what we do has a ripple effect around the world. So there's a lot of dystopian books out there. They're well written, they're great, they're good entertainment. There's a lot of wonderful stories, but it's really it's important to us to keep hopeful. There's a lot that happens in our story. There's civilization, rises and falls, but there's always hope, and there's always light, and there's always this basic love that connects people. And that's the undercurrent of our work. And if we can add one little bit of love and compassion and empathy to the world, that's our goal. That's what it's always been for us.
Yeah. And our story basically is set within this or the backdrop is this great year cycle that is something that people don't know a lot about. And it was written about in 31 ancient civilizations that apparently had no contact with each other. And it's a 26,000 year cycle that they all wrote about. And that's the backdrop within our story. So you get to learn all these interesting stuff you probably never knew about while being, entertained through the adventure story.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you also for taking the time out of your weekend, out of your Father's Day, to talk to me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for
thoroughly
having us,
enjoyed
Sarah.
it.
I really enjoyed talking to you. And the book is out. The first two are out, and you can get those pretty much anywhere. Is that correct?
Absolutely, anywhere you're any bookstore.
Amazon's running nice deals on the Kindle right now, so you can check it out on Amazon, and all your local bookstores. If you want to do the bricks and mortar, they're absolutely able to order it in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you once again to my guests Tamara Veitch and Rene DeFazio for joining me. I really loved having them on the podcast, loved talking to them. You can tell just by the way they interact with each other that they're a pretty good team. I appreciated that they kind of not finish each other's sentences, but kind of complete each other's thoughts in terms of their writing and their work, and there wasn't a lot of stepping over each other in terms of answering questions. So it was just a lot of fun to talk to them. If you are interested in the Emissary, I do have copies to give away. So if you go to our social media, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, that's GSMC Book Review on each of those, and find the episode 162, interview with Tamara Veitch and Rene DeFazio. Just go ahead and comment on those posts and like them. Comment and like, and you'll be entered to win a copy of the Emissary. Again, any of our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, episode 162, interview with Tamara Veitch and Rene DeFazio. Comment and like, and you'll be entered to win a copy of the Emissary. Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I appreciate you so much, and thank you again to Tamara and Rene for joining me. Join me again next time. We'll be back to talking about sci-fi news, sci-fi movies, sci-fi television, sci-fi books, whatever it is that might be out there, comic books. We'll be talking about news from the world of sci-fi, the many worlds of sci-fi, I should say. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.